Hello, my name is Scott Rushton, and I'm here to introduce Stormloop's second built-on Workday product, Multi-Tenant Web Service Monitor. Multi-Tenant Web Service Monitor is the second installment in our multi-tenant collection. The third release is happening with our third application in just a few weeks. These applications are intended to provide coverage to all of your Workday environments: production, sandbox, implementation tenants, as well as preview. This application is API oriented, so think integrations or external vendors, and should provide additional security for all of your Workday tenants. In this specific demonstration, this will be posted to the application page on Workday's website. I'll review the application flow against current state. I'll provide the goals and the insight into why this application came about. I'll do a brief demonstration and overview in one of our test environments to show the Workday user interface. And finally, I'll provide some commentary on some questions that have come from initial client conversations. So into what happens today with an API. So in current state, when an internal or external system calls an API in your tenant, they generate a Workday API request. Workday receives and processes that request and then sends a request back, or in the form of a response, back to that internal or external system. When they make an API request, that API request is not documented by your Workday tenant. So your security administrators, your integration administrators, they cannot see which APIs are being called by those external systems. They also cannot see what information is being queried from your tenant. So for example, if an ISU or an integration system user incorrectly has access to payroll data, technically an external system could call API endpoints in your Workday tenant, and you'd never know. Our product is intended to defend against that, and I'll review what that flow looks like next. So with Multi-Tenant Web Service Monitor, this is what your new API flow looks like. The internal or external system still generates a Workday API request. There is no change required in the request that's provided by that internal or external system. This is then integrated with our Janus technology, which is intellectual property here at Stormloop. It documents the request in the form of an audit log entry, and it provides it for your security team. Additionally, it checks to see if the API request is authorized. So if it's a demographic or a worker-based organization that's querying your tenant with an API, you can configure them that they can only pull worker demographic data. They cannot pull payroll data, they cannot pull financials data, and you'll see that in the demonstration. So it does check to see, are they authorized to do what they're trying to do? If not, their request is blocked. They won't even touch your tenant, they won't even touch your data, and you will have the opportunity to alert your security team. So if a benefits vendor tries to pull payroll data that they're not supposed to, or financials data, that will be logged and they will not be able to see that data, even if the integration system user has that access. If it is authorized, the request will be permitted to proceed. It will authenticate via traditional integration system user authentication into your tenant. There still needs to be an integration security group. And then the request is sent back to, in the form of a response, is sent back to that internal or external vendor with the exact same response format that they would receive today. So the only difference with that internal or external vendor is that they have a different endpoint. They no longer get that public web service endpoint that's available in your tenant. They have a specific multi-tenant web service monitor endpoint that they are provided. Overall goals of the application: we want to monitor your API access across all tenants. That includes inbound and outbound integrations, as well as HR and financials. Secondly, we want to enforce what we call traffic controls with your integration system users. Even if that ISU has way too much security, we want you to be able to say that this ISU can only call this specific web service. Right? So that protects you even further against vendors who may be aware of Workday public APIs. We want you to be able to identify and analyze API usage patterns, so you can now run reports in Workday on this data. It will allow you to see exactly how many API calls are being called, how many are successful, and how many are failed. So it does provide that data to you from all of your Workday environments. And then lastly, in the same spirit of reporting, you can provide actionable leadership reports as well as audit readiness for access to your data. So now it's a more accurate answer when your auditors ask who has access to payroll data. because you can look in this application to see who specifically has access to payroll web services. So it's a much more accurate audit exercise. You can also configure alerts. So if a financial vendor ever queries for everybody's salary, that your auditors and your security administrators can be alerted through conventional Workday notification tools. These are the overall goals of the application. We are a Workday certified partner. We work with integration teams quite often. Those integration teams integrate with internal and external systems on the vendor side. And they often ask, hey, what is this vendor trying to call in our tenant? And unfortunately, we can't see it, right? If that vendor is calling Workday, we have no visibility into what they're calling. We may have their specification, but sometimes they make errors in their code. Sometimes they call the wrong APIs. This tool is intended to provide you visibility as well as protect your data. So it is a comprehensive visibility tool as well as a security tool in tandem with our other multi-tenant collection members. I'll do a brief demo just to show how easy this tool is to navigate. So here we are in one of our test tenants. This is the home page, which has some onboarding information and ways to generate your multi-tenant web service monitor endpoint to provide your vendors. On the administration tab, you can create tenants. I'm going to scroll down to one tenant I created proactively for this session. You can see here it's the Stormloop test tenant. All you need to create a tenant is the description and the WSDL. This is available on the public web service. It stops at the tenant name. I have here the credentials. First thing you do when setting up credentials is you set up your ISU. So when I put in my ISU, I would put the title of the ISU, the username, the password, and as well as the available tenants. So you'll see here our Stormloop test tenant, which was available on the other screen. You can select multiple tenants. So if you have production, sandbox, and impl, you can use multiple tenants as long as the password is the same. Once you have your ISU, that ISU is connected to the tenant. The password is now in this application. It is not shared with an external vendor. It actually stays right here in your tenant. I'm going to go ahead and create an API key. When I create an API key, I similarly put the description for the API key. I also put the Workday tenant name. So here are some of the ISUs that I created. And I specifically call out the integration web services that are available. So if I go get workers here, I can put get workers. If I go edit worker additional data, that's available. Right? I can go payroll. These are Workday delivered web services. You can see that there's over 100 that have payroll information included. But I specifically am tying an API key to an ISU. Now just for demo purposes, I could do one live. I'm now given an API key. This is the key that I would send to the vendor. So if we were working with a benefits vendor, I would send them this key, and I would say, this is what you'll use to authenticate into our tenant. You do not have to send them an API, an ISU username. You do not have to send them an ISU password. And then finally, if I just go home here, you can see all of the API requests that have been made here in one page. So here I preemptively ran some get workers requests into multiple tenants. You can see those here. You can see the date time they were received, the API key that was used, the ISU that's related to, the status that they received, the tenant that they touched, as well as the specific API that they queried. Not only can you see the API operation, but you can also see the actual API that they sent to your tenant. I'll demonstrate that in a moment. I can see the IP address, the status that they received, as well as the tenant and the ISU here. I cannot see the response, right? The response is not stored in the tool, right? So the application does not store what they saw for security purposes, but it does store what they brought to your tenant. We obviously redact any ISU passwords because we do not like those to be visible to users, even if they know them. They should store them outside of Workday. So here you can see and you can report and export this data, all of the API requests that have been made into these tenants. And just to do a demo, I will go to the credentials. I will go to manage my API keys. I will scroll back down here to the test Stormloop key. I will edit the credential. I have get workers here. And here I am in Postman, which is an integration tool. If I press send here, you'll see I get the response. This is a get workers for Logan McNeil. Awesome. I need this to send her benefits package or some internal benefit through this integration. Great. I can run the API. I can see it. Perfect. I'm going to remove get workers and say this key can't run get workers anymore. They don't need that access. So immediately when I do that, I can press send. I now get an error that says credentials are not authorized for the requested operation. So if I go back to my API request, I can now see that I made one successful attempt and I made one failed attempt with the 406. My security team can now come to this tool, filter, and say, who has run and maybe run into an authentication error with Workday? Who has run with an unauthorized web service? Right? This is all reportable in Workday when in current state this data is not stored in your tenant. Other key component here is that you can see all tenants in one spot. If anybody tries to act inappropriately in a test environment, you'll be able to see this all in one place. So that's my demonstration. Most clients are setting up the tenants and the credentials in under 15 minutes. It's very straightforward. We assist with the initial deployment to make sure that it goes very smooth. And we're looking forward to onboarding future clients to make sure that we can provide full integration system security to all of your tenant data in the form of API requests. And then just to go over a couple of the common questions, the internal and external vendors will use a Janus endpoint, which is our technology for API recognition to control API traffic. They will not have any access into your tenant. They will not have access to any of your data. They will not have a username and password to your tenant. In fact, they will not even have a tenant endpoint. Client security teams will enable specific API requests for each user, right? So you can use multiple users with one key, but it's best practice to split them out. You can enable specific security data points for each ISU user to protect your data beyond what Workday allows out of the box. You can set security for the application itself by your Workday security administrator. We do not require Workday access to set up this application. So if you are not currently a Stormloop AMS customer or project-based customer, we do not need to be onboarded for this application to work. Your security team or your integration team can set this up and will receive documentation to assist with onboarding. One question we got on multiple meetings was if an Active Directory or a common internal vendor tries to pull everybody's salary or payroll data, will that show up? The answer is yes, right? If you give them an endpoint from our tool, yes, you can see this in the tool. You will see it with a 406. And yes, you can set up alerts using Workday delivered functionality to be notified if this ever happens. And then we did receive a question about our early adopter program. For our first 5 customers, we are prioritizing their feedback for our first release. We're doing discounted costs on other products such as Multi-Tenant Security Audit Central and our AMS services, and we are including installation assistance and oversight. So we're looking forward to working with the client teams to get this product up and running. We're looking forward to introducing it via the Workday Marketplace to the Workday ecosystem, and we're looking forward to future applications that will come out by Stormloop and other partners to further expand the marketplace functionality. Thank you for listening. Please reach out to bow@stormlooptech.com if you have any additional questions regarding this application or Stormloop in general. Thank you.